I'm not sure if this video will see the light of day because it's probably terrible. But my name is Rachel and I used to film a semi-regular knitting video thing. But that's been about 2 years since that happened because many things have happened in the past 2 years. I graduated my master's, I got a job, there was a pandemic, I moved house. Yeah, so I am still knitting, just don't really feel like putting things out. But I've been watching a lot of people who I like doing knitting talking about books that they like. So I'm going to do that today because one thing that has definitely improved over the past few years is my reading. To the point where so far this year I have read 22 books, which is mad considering last year I read 52 books total. I am currently 10 books ahead of schedule, I think it is. 12 or 10. 10 or 12. I'm ahead of schedule. And I'm not counting some of them because some of them are very small. So yes, I've got my reading journal here, which just has a list. I also have my Goodreads on my phone so I can remember the plot if I need like refreshing, and we will see how things go. As I said, very out of practice. Don't know if this will exist. But we started off the year reading the second James Herriot book. So James Herriot is a pseudonym for a vet who wrote these sort of pseudo-memoirs about his life as a 1930s country vet. So I read It Shouldn't Happen to a Vet, pseudo-memoir. The character of James Herriot is made up, but it's based on, what's the person's name? His name is James Alfred Wright. So it's his experiences, but he's fictionalised them. And I gave that one 3 stars. It was nice, it was warm, it was fuzzy. Each chapter is a different vetish problem. I'm sure you've all seen the TV series is based off of this. They follow the title All Things Great and Small. I believe there was one in the 80s, but they recently rebooted it last summer. And it was beautiful, and that's why I picked them up. I realised my mum had all of the books, so I'm slowly making my way through those. And yeah, so that was the book that I carried over from, I started on the 30th of December and I carried it over into the new year, so that was the first book that I finished. I then read Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, and I have retrospectively upped my rating from a 4-star to a 5-star because this book lives in my brain. I know there have been a few controversies because it's a white woman writing about a mixed heritage main character, and there are some problematic passages in the book, but they have taken some of them out for any reprints. That some passages won't be in there, and from what I've heard about the sequel, they're definitely working together to make more of a representative book, but it hasn't been cancelled, which I think is testament to the fact that the author was very receptive to the criticisms and is actively striving to make things better. So I would recommend this book, especially if you like well explained magic systems. I know some people didn't get on with it because they had lots of exposition and info dumps, but I love that. It's like studying all over again, but you're just getting a download of information and I really liked that. I liked the character. The main character you're not meant to like, but she is still, you're still really invested. And it left on a cliffhanger. And the sequel comes out in July, I think. I have it pre-ordered, and I can't wait. So that was that. Book number 3. I'm going to run out. I'm going to forget which numbers we're on, but we'll just go with this. Was an audiobook I listened/read to, which was Home Fire by Camilla Shamsi, which is a modern day retelling of the Greek myth of Antigone, focusing mainly on the Muslim experience in Britain, and it was so impactful. It was brilliant. Even as an audiobook, it was, with most myth retellings, you know it's not going to end well, because they don't end well in the myths. But it was just heartbreaking, this book, and definitely would recommend it. It comes highly recommended. I gave it 4 stars. I think because I didn't necessarily latch on to any of the characters, and I couldn't tell you what made the characters special now, but it was definitely a thought-provoking book that features a very important set of issues to discuss and talk through. So yeah, more of a contemporary book, which is, so we've gone through everything. We've gone through a historical, a fantasy, and a contemporary. We'll figure out my tastes are pretty wide and varied, because the next book we move on to was The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which is the first in the Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy in her whole body of work, which is called The Realm of the Elderlings. I think there are 5 series. One of them's a quartet, but most of them are trilogies. So if I'm really going to get into it, I've got a decent back catalogue to work my way through. I think they're all published, and I gave this one 4 stars again. It was really good, especially if you like slow, character-based fantasy novels with a little bit of plot in there too. Well-explained magic systems and consequences. We've got mental health issues. We've got people, when they get injured, you see them recover, which I know Grace from Babbel's Travelling Yarns and /Babbel's books. I know that bugs her in most fantasy films, books and films. You get hit and you're up the next week or something. No, in Robin Hobb's world, you take that time to recover, and it details it out really well. They've got wonderful sort of relationships with animals, which just heartbreaking. And we follow the main character Fitz, who is he is the bastard son of the crown prince, the heir, but when Fitz comes to light and is acknowledged, the crown prince abdicates and eventually dies. So the royal family essentially are left with this child they don't know what to do with, and they decide he would be very helpful and very useful to train as an apprentice to the assassin, the court assassin. So there's a lot of shady underdealings there, and it's just really beautiful. So yeah, I've got the sequel. We will see how it goes. I know I follow a lot of people on BookTube who are currently doing a read of this series, and everyone seems to love it, so I'm giving it a go. So yeah. Next up was a non-fiction, lightly in air quotes because it's another set of Greek myths, but it's with modern language, so if you are sensitive of language, you may wish to turn away. But this is the title of a book, and it is called Zeus is a Dick. by Susie Donkin, and she is one of the writers for Horrible Histories. This is definitely an adult retelling though, but it does take a lot of the same humour that you get in the Horrible Histories TV show. Very modern. It's like a grown-up Percy Jackson. It's not anything groundbreaking. We all know the myths. We all know the personalities of these gods and goddesses. It's just making fun of them while you do it. Like Hera giving birth to Hephaestus, deciding he is ugly, so she yeets him off of Mount Olympus. It's that sort of language. It won't sit with many people, but I found it hilarious, so I gave it a 4 stars. I give a lot of 4 stars if you hadn't guessed, because the last book of January was a graphic novel. I am reading the Giant Days graphic novels. I'm borrowing them from my library on their digital service. I read volume 3 in January. They're written by John Allison. I can't remember who the artist is. Goodreads will tell me. Max Sarin is the illustrations, and it follows 3 girls who are at university, just doing university things. I think they're meant to go to Sheffield University, which sort of like it's part of the White Rose Consortium, which is what University of York was as well, and just so many things that they do are just so familiar. It's just ridiculous, and it really makes me feel almost as though it's like going home, because it's so familiar, having been at university for 4.5, 5 years, if we're thinking about, even though the time I was ill, I was still at university. It's just gorgeous and lovely, and the art style is beautiful, and yeah, I love Giant Days so much. Yeah, so if you're looking for a graphic novel / comic book to get into, you just want something nice and wholesome, Giant Days. My god, Giant Days. You can read them in you can read each volume in about 2 hours, probably. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. I'm going to add 3 books in here too, because I don't count them in my journal or towards my my count of books, but I did read all 3 of the Sarah Scribbles books by Sarah Anderson. So they are Adulthood is a Myth, Big Mushy Happy Lump, and Herding Cats. You will recognise the art style. So it's this one. And they were just fun. Again, borrowed from the library, because my library actually has a really good online repository. So yeah, really enjoyed those. I don't think I rated them. No, I didn't rate them, because they were ones that you could read in like half an hour. They're just pretty cartoon doodles and very relatable. So yes, I read 3 of those as well. At some point, I didn't attribute dates to them. I just recorded that I read them. So that was January, and I read a total of 6 books in my little book. Moving on to February. I started off the month badly, because I read The Betrayals by Bridget Collins, which everyone else seems to love, but I gave 2 stars and described it as though you were in the middle of a bog. The fog was rolling in, you didn't know which way was up, you didn't know which way was down. It just made no sense to me. I wasn't attached to the characters. I got their story, that was really nice. That was probably the only nice thing about it, is the way that sort of figured it out. But as I mentioned when I talked about the Deadly Education, I like things to be explained, and it wasn't here, and I just really struggled with that. a lot of people love it. I think it's also because it's meant to, this system that they're talking about, this game or magic, I'm not sure what it is. It's based on music and maths. Now, I did a maths A level, but I forced it. I really forced that maths A level. I can do basic maths, but if you're talking like, if you're getting down into the quantum stuff, it's like, no. And music, got no hope. Honestly, I barely listen to music. I can't, my pitch is off. I've got no idea. If you play one note and play me another one and ask me if it's higher or lower, no idea. If you ask me if something's flat or sharp, no idea. And I played cello for 5 years. Badly, I will add. But yeah, I didn't get it. It's just not designed for my brain, clearly. But if you really like character stuff, or if you know more about music and maths, which my sister does, she really enjoyed it, then maybe check it out. But if you're looking for something fun and light-hearted, this is not the book. No. I then moved on to wrapping up a series. So I read A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget. This was the 3rd book in the A Curse So Dark and Lonely series. I only gave this 3 stars because it felt undeveloped. We didn't necessarily get an ending, because the first book follows 2 characters, and then a side character and another character are featured in the 2nd book, and then the 3rd book brings them all back together. And I felt like the 2nd set of characters got a definitive ending, but the characters that we initially fell in love with didn't, and that was a struggle for me. I just, it wasn't satisfying. It was all a bit convenient. So it's a nice series. We've got disability representation in there, because the main character we meet in the 1st book has cerebral palsy, which is not something that is, disability rep is not something that features in fantasy very much at all, and especially to the point where fantasy didn't try to fix it, which is really good to sort of represent to disabled people that they don't need fixing. It's just a part of who they are, and I found that really lovely. But it definitely faded those sort of things over time, and I wasn't necessarily happy with this final wrap up. I then needed a book to fill 2 days because I was at home and I didn't want to read something and have to take it back. So I read a nice short little non-fiction book about all the horrible things humans do, and it was called One Bloody Thing After Another by Jacob F. Field, spanning from the ancient Greeks to not quite modern day. We definitely hit, no, we didn't. It stopped before the 20th century because the 20th century just gets, there's a reason I didn't study modern history. The 20th century is brutal. But it's, you know, I went through a phase when I was about 17 where I was morbidly obsessed with death. Like, morbid. It was concerning. I remember sitting on the bus to school and one of my teachers had lent me a book titled The History of Executions, and I just read that on the bus and terrified all of the younger students. So this book was bought in that sort of same time period, and I mean, it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. It's a fun little history book. I've now read, I mean, I do history academically, or I did history academically. It's not serious here, but it was fun. And it had good geographic spread, so which was really good to see. So something from all continents throughout different time periods. There was a decent focus on medieval, which often there isn't. So it did good work in that way, but it was just a bit simple. The book I read after that, though, was Possession by A.S. Byatt, which was sent to me by my pen pal Nikki, Hippie Nikki of Tea and Possibilities podcast. And this got 5 stars straight out of the bat because this was gorgeous. So it follows 2 academics as they're looking into documents related to 2 historical figures, 2 historical, I think they're meant to be poets, and it does a really good job of using different epistemological forms. So you've got your letters, you've got your regular prose, you've got poems, you've got diary entries, you've got pseudo-academic writings, and you can tell the author had taken the time to separate out, and each of these different characters had a different voice, they had a different way, each of the different formats was masterful. I believe it did win the Booker Prize when it was published in the 90s, and honestly it was gorgeous. It again made me homesick for university because of how well it evoked that sort of academic vibes. It was stunning. Loved it. So thank you, Nikki, and I'm sorry it took me like 3 years to get to it, but that's just how things are going. Honestly, if you're in any way interested in any form of historical fiction or literary fiction, please read it. It is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But it was heavy hitting, so what did I need after that? I needed Giant Days, so I read volume 4, and that again got another 4 stars. I think we wrapped up their first year in volume 4, so their first year at uni, and we're now moving into their second year in volumes 5 and 6, which we will get to. I then borrowed a book from the library called The Sea Witch by Sarah Henning. I remember very little about this, apart from it was meant to be sort of an origin story of the Sea Witch, like in The Little Mermaid with Ursula. That's all I could think about. I don't remember much about it. It was fun while you read it. I gave it 3 stars. These sort of books, I heard someone refer to as junk food books, in that they're not memorable. You have fun whilst you're consuming them, but they don't provide sustenance, and I think that's a good analogy. So yes, Sea Witch by Sarah Henning, 3 stars. It was okay. I then read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which people have been telling me to read for a while, and I gave this one 5 stars too, because again, this was a sort of literary, beautiful book, but this one had more of a magical realism sort of feel to it. We follow 2 young magicians who are sort of tied into a magic competition, and the location for this is the Night Circus, and you follow so many different perspectives and over a significant period of time, and it was just beautiful and heartbreaking, and yeah, not good. Well, it was very good, but the ending is just like, oh, my heart. So The Night Circus. And then I had this audiobook that I was reading. I was reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I gave it 2 stars. It was not great. I did not enjoy it, mainly because I got really fed up with Dr. Frankenstein as a narrator, because he was just whiny, he was self-pitying, he annoyed me so much. Even Dan Stevens, who played Matthew in Downton Abbey, he was the narrator and he couldn't save it, which I think says everything we need to know. And that was February, which I read 8 books. So it's currently the 28th of March. So we haven't completely finished March, but I've already got enough books to talk about March. So we'll do that as well. I went on and read The Shadows of the Pomegranate Tree by Tariq Ali. And this was an amazing book. So it follows a family, a Muslim family after the fall of Granada and the Reconquista by Isabel of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. So we're talking Spain, and I don't know what it was, but ever since I was about 14 or something, I was obsessed with Muslims play, with the Al-Andalus and the Alhambra. I desperately want to go to Granada, but I'm always told, no, we can't go there. So one day I will go to Granada because I want to. But this follows, it's been several years since the fall of Granada, and we follow this family as they sort of get swept up into the I think it's called the Alpujarras uprising in 1499. Another one where the ending just breaks your heart, but it was so engrossing, and I think it's really good to see historical fiction that is outside of white mainly royals or upper class people. It's still European, but Spain is not usually where you would go for your historical fiction, or at least I don't. So it's really good to see that different perspective. Yeah, I definitely, if you again are into your historical fiction, want to check out to broaden horizons. Really good. Giant Days Volume 5, that's on there again, 4 stars again, because I can't seem to rate it any lower, and it doesn't quite push into 5 stars, because I mean the stories are just small and wholesome, there's nothing groundbreaking. I then read The Queens of Inisleer by Tessa Gratton, which was a struggle. This was a fantasy retelling of Shakespeare's King Lear, but I didn't realise that until I was about 50 pages in, and all of a sudden, oh wait, this seems familiar, because they changed all of the names, so I didn't get it, and you wouldn't instantaneously get it from the title, I don't feel. But it follows particularly the 3 daughters and their sort of lives. There was like earth magic, but also star magic, and I don't know, it didn't sit very well with me. It was trying to be too literary, and it didn't work, I don't think. That one. So then I moved on to A Witch in Time by Constance Sayers. This one was about a woman who is reincarnated sort of every 40 years, and we follow primarily the woman reincarnated in 2012 as she's slowly regaining her memories of her previous lives. So we follow, I think it's 1890s, 1920s and 1960s, 70s? No, it was 1930s, not 1920s. And it was interesting, and I love books that hop around different time periods. Didn't feel necessarily connected to any of the characters, but it was still good fun, and I gave it 4 stars. And then the last 3 books we have here are subject to the fact that I haven't necessarily been enjoying them. They've been really good books, but I haven't necessarily been finding them fun. So we've gone into the YA fantasy romance genre, and we are going for it. I read An Enchantment of Ravens, which is a standalone by Margaret Rogerson. I gave this 5 stars because it was beautiful, and it was the most fun I had reading since A Deadly Education. It follows this young human woman who is a portrait painter. Elves, or rather the Fae, can't produce crafts and works of their own, so they rely on humans to do it, and she paints a portrait of the Prince of the Autumn Court, but accidentally paints human emotion into his eyes, and she is taken to be held accountable for this crime, and all sorts of things happen, and it was so much fun. It's one of those where it's an unbelievable sort of romance, like, you've known this person for a week, why are you in love with them? But it was still beautiful. And then of course, where do you go from there? You go to the booktube and seemingly knitting podcast classic. I had a reread of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas, mainly because I read it 3 years ago and I cannot remember anything at all. Nothing. So I reread it. Little bits came back to me as I was reading it. It's like, oh yeah, but then I also remember I hated Lucian on the first time round, and he is such a mood. I mean, I was reading this and like, I am Lucian, which is fair because if we look at the map, I am in the Autumn Court, so yeah, he is. Yeah, I remember bits of the other 2 books, but very little actual plot. You remember the steamy bits, you remember nothing else. So I will be reading those at some point. I gave that 4 stars because, again, junk food is fun whilst you read it. And then I read a book in one sitting yesterday, a 200-page book in one sitting. I read the novella How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black, which is a companion to the Cruel Prince, or I don't know what the Folk of the Air series, that's what it's called. And I loved it. It was adorable. I gave that one 4 stars too. The illustrations were gorgeous. I borrowed that one from the library as well, and yeah, it was beautiful, absolutely stunning. And just sweet little stories that there's a little bit of plot running through, but it's just, I like seeing characters happy, and that accomplished it, and it was beautiful. So yes, that is where I'm at with March. As you see, March. I started filling out how many pages I read every day. You may see I've increased over the past few days, but that's because I've been having a chronic fatigue flare-up and I can't focus on anything screen-wise, so I just read books instead. Yes. Although that is essentially the first quarter of my books, it has taken half an hour. Not sure it's any good. But if you liked this, or if you've got any recommendations, or if you've read any of these books, please let me know down below what you thought. Yeah, I don't know if I'll do another one. I'm really into my reading at the moment, and I wanted to share it. So thank you very much, and I might see you soon, or I might not. Anyway, bye.